Jackie Gleason will always be remembered as one of America's greatest comedy talents. Born in Brooklyn, New York City, I guess you could say that he was a graduate of the School of Hard Knocks. Maybe that's why he always seemed to work harder than everyone else around him. When it came time for him to get a show on TV, he wanted to own it. Unheard of in the days of early television, Gleason often penned deals that provided him with huge sums of money and allowed him to produce many of his own shows. Everything Gleason did, he did with great passion. Every script for the TV shows had to be just the way he envisioned it. No one was ever allowed to step out of character. Camera shots and angles were always set up the way he wanted them. His passion also extended into his personal life. Fascinated by flying saucers and the unexplained, he ultimately assembled one of the world's greatest parapsychological libraries. The bulk of it resides today at the University of Miami Library. In 1982, I was a guest on a talk show at a Miami radio station. The subject was UFOs and the paranormal. After the show, I was handed a note by the receptionist. This often happens when I do radio guest spots because some people prefer to share their own UFO or paranormal experiences with me off the air. While walking to my car, I took a quick look at the note. It said, "Please call Mr. Gleason at," and it gave a phone number. When I arrived back at my hotel room, I called the number, asked for Mr. Gleason, and gave my name. An assistant got on the phone and informed me that Jackie Gleason wanted to speak to me, if possible, the next day at a Fort Lauderdale location. Well, needless to say, I accepted the invitation. The meeting location was a bar at the Jolly Roger Hotel in Fort Lauderdale. Now, I don't know if Gleason owned the hotel, or merely had friends there, but after stopping by the front desk, I was escorted to a small bar that was closed to the public at that time of day. Gleason sat at a table like a king holding court, but looked older and weaker than I had imagined he would. I wondered why Gleason hadn't met me in one of his favorite Miami haunts, but it may be that he just wanted to keep a low profile. Either way, I knew that Gleason was a serious guy who hated small talk, and I wasn't about to ruffle his feathers. After a brief handshake, Gleason asked me a number of questions about my UFO and paranormal investigations. We talked for about an hour and a half. Actually, he asked questions and I answered them. He said to me, "I get your newsletter," he said knowingly. "Good stuff." He was especially interested in articles that covered the topic of crashed UFOs. At that time, a lot of buzz had been created by former military officers who had begun to speak out about their involvement with the cover-up of UFO crashes. Out of the blue, Gleason told me how that Richard Nixon was a good friend of his. In fact, he had supported Nixon in every possible way during his successful bid for the presidency in 1968. In 1971, Gleason's efforts were rewarded when he attended a small White House dinner in Gleason's honor. After dinner, Gleason spoke privately with Richard Nixon. He asked the president if there was anything that Nixon could tell him about UFOs. Were they real? Were they alien spacecraft? Well, according to Gleason, Nixon told him, "Well, Jackie, if you can arrange to arrive at MacDill Air Force Base in Tampa sometime over the next few days, I'll arrange to have you shown some things that may help answer some of your questions." Gleason arrived in Tampa, Florida, a day and a half later. After calling a phone number provided to him by someone on Nixon's staff, he headed out to MacDill Air Force Base. After arriving on the base, he was taken to a dark-colored building that appeared to be some sort of a storage facility. Once inside, he had to pass through several levels of security. Finally, Gleason was escorted into a large room where some strange debris lay on the floor. An officer told him, "This material is from Roswell." No emotion, just a matter-of-fact statement. The officer handed Gleason a small piece which seemed almost weightless and very flexible. Just then, a light came on in the center part of the room. Gleason was astonished to see what looked like a large piece of a broken disc just floating a few feet above the floor. Warned not to approach it, Gleason still got an eyeful, but the surprises weren't over. After just a few minutes, Gleason was escorted to another room. 3 containers with glass plates for viewing greeted him. These were the occupants found near the object you just saw. Again, with little emotion, the officer gave Jackie a one-sentence description that spoke volumes. The beings were about 4 to 5 feet tall. 2 of the bodies were badly damaged, but one was in very good shape. As Gleason looked at it, the officer said, "This one died later." It had large oval eyes, grayish skin, and looked male. "Are they all males?" Gleason asked. "Your guess is as good as ours." He answered Jackie with a slight smile, but it was time to go. The experience of seeing the object and bodies affected Gleason more than he first realized.
Jackie Gleason and the story about Jackie Gleason's involvement with UFOs. There was a story that surfaced some time back that pertained to Jackie Gleason's interest in the subject of unidentified flying objects. He was a good friend of Richard Nixon, and Jackie Gleason apparently was so fascinated with the subject that he even had his home built to in the shape of a flying saucer. He called his home the Mothership, and this is his Florida home. We've got a picture of it here. Allegedly, according to the way the story goes in UFO folklore, Jackie Gleason was shown alien bodies by President Nixon at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida. What we have done in the last year, we've made progress on in this investigation. We've actually tracked down the ex-wife of Jackie Gleason, Beverly McKittrick. I interviewed her by telephone last July, and she did confirm the story for us, and we were very surprised to make contact with her, because I'd tried for maybe 3 or 4 years to get a hold of this woman. She's hard to get a hold of. She wasn't listed, but we kind of do you have a question, sir?
Yes. Was there a reported UFO crash? Because if bodies have been coming from somewhere close by, if they're in recent time frame.
Well, I don't know. I certainly don't have the answer to that.
An interesting line of investigation.
Yeah, there's the UFO subject is full of reported UFO crashes, so we don't, our focus is not necessarily on what crash that was. Our focus was on talking to his ex-wife and getting the story about this.
Larry, you want to meet the great one, like you just said? And I'm like, which great one? And he goes, Jackie Gleason. We've been invited to his house. Now, people think he lived in Hollywood. He didn't. He's from New York anyway, but people think he had a house in Florida. He did. But I met him at his house in Briarcliff Manor in Westchester County, New York. That was his main house. I didn't know that. And so Larry and me drove all the way down to, the Taconic Parkway, I remember. And we get to his house, very wealthy area, secluded houses, Paul Newman, not far, very close to Connecticut border, Stamford and all those places. And we go in, there was a couple other people there. I don't remember, it was me and Larry, and there was another researcher. I can't place it, and his daughter, I think, was there running around the house. He had a big pool table, everything you'd imagine was Jackie Gleason. He was a big guy, mustache, and he got taught. I had to go through the whole spiel. He said, I didn't get to hear it when you're doing Griffin. But he had read Larry's book, and he was fascinated. And they corresponded. He wanted to meet me. So when I did that dance with him, I was asking him all kind of things about the honeymooners. He said they filmed that where Studio. He goes, Studio 54. And I go, yeah. He goes, that's where we shot the honeymooners. CBS Studio 54 is what it was. He goes, before it was that disco shit. And cigars, Rob Royce. You want a drink? Fucking awesome. And of course, I asked for an autograph, and he signed it, and I have it. I just found it after 40 some odd years in a box, and I have pictures of him somewhere. But it was a pleasant afternoon, and he told me the story. He told me and Larry and the other guy. Get this other guy, might be dead, who he knew, a researcher. You know, Whitley Strieber's the guy who told me I should write a book back in '85. I knew Whitley way before Communion. But away from that, it wasn't Whitley, though. It was someone, though, with that kind of, God, I can't remember. But we did that, and we did that show and that gig, that hang at his house. And he told me about Nixon. He goes, I'm going to lay it on you. He goes, in '69, he goes, I knew Crafty Richard, Nixon. We hit golf balls. My dad's I'm from a golfing family. I'm not one of them. And he goes, I'm down in Florida at my house, Homestead Air Force Base, Larry. I go, yeah, I know of it. This is before the hurricane that wiped it out later on in the 80s. And it was still active. And he goes, so I didn't live far from home. It was my summer house. Still have it. And I didn't know Florida. I don't think I'd ever even been to Florida at that point. And he said, I'm sitting there one night outside, comes in my driveway. And there's this black Lincoln. There's Nixon driving. Just Nixon. And I'm like, no Secret Service. Now, Larry's a cop, so he's asking more relevant questions. And he said, come with me. Come with me. We drove down. I've seen people put the words in all this. It's not how he told it. He said, so we drive down to effing Homestead. And he goes, and I'd done things for the USO on there back in Vietnam, everything, so I knew a lot of the retired commanders. In we go to the, you guys, main gates in, and he took me to this back section of the base near the runway. And in this normal hangar, it was an underground base. They went in and I've seen this not even told right. He told me exactly. Nixon goes, you're not going to believe this. He goes, we've had one of these things go down near Florida. He goes, you like the UFOs and all? He goes, I'm telling you, Jack, they're real. And he goes, I'm like, well, he goes, I've friggin' seen him, Dick. I've seen, he said, I told him I've seen him. And I said, you didn't believe me? And he goes, well, I've seen one too, maybe, but now I've seen all I need to see. And he goes, you're going to see it. And he goes, boom, boom. He goes, you understand this goes nowhere. He had a big mouth like me. So, but I think in Nixon's lifetime, he never said a thing. It screwed him. He goes, this screwed me. And he goes, they wonder why I drink. We go in there. And he goes, you hear there were coolers. There were actually, remember the old red Coca-Cola machines, the freezers? It was freezers. It was like real quick, get something to put this stuff in. There were dead bodies of non-human beings. And they were big red coolers with Coca-Cola on the side. And he said, I'm thinking it's a joke. He goes, the smell, there were other people there to open it. The Secret Service all came flying on the base lights blaze. And I don't know if they have trackers back then on, but the president's running around with no one because they wouldn't have let this happen with the Jackie. And this is the story he relayed to me. He didn't see wreckage of any craft, but Nixon, I think, if I recall, and this is secondhand 40 years ago, is that this crash near Florida or was shot down or something, and these are recovered non-humans. I don't know, he didn't say him. But they were in, it was just like, let's get something to keep these things preserved. It was so recent. It wasn't like a Roswell thing at all. And they had Coke. He goes, those Coke machines, the big coolers with, I go, yeah, because that's what they were in. It wasn't this special thing you see in movies, these cryogenic chambers and all. And I'm sitting there thinking, is this guy, like when I was with Lear, I'm thinking, are these guys bullshitting me or what? They think I'm a street guy. I think he wasn't. But I never forget him saying, they wonder why I drink so much. Took a big hit and I said, that's where it is. That's where it stopped. Now, knew about it. Remember the late Tim Beckley, good friend of mine. Tim passed. Oh, he was waiting for the movie too. So many dead waiting for the movies. Capel Green. And I miss that guy. He was such a character.
I used to go to his conference every year in San Diego, Tim Beckley.
Do you remember the one we got thrown out of the hotel and had to find?
I heard stories about it, yeah.
I was at that one. I partied with the Moody Blues at his. I jammed with them at a Holiday Inn at one of his conferences. I had a stalker come after with a crossbow at one of them. Legend. It was made Keith Moon's adventures look like rank high school, you know? Oh, bless his heart. Those are the fun stuff. Did Jackie Gleason happen? Do I believe him? Of course. He had no reason to lie to me. As time went on, I did an interview with Tim, and it's in those crazy books he put out. And some years later, his ex-wife did a tell-all and put the story in it. But I was on record before that, but it was probably, who's this kid, this Larry, you know, and all. But Larry Fawcett was with me, you know. So all them people are dead now. I've been on record with that since it really had happened. I didn't really know. I said, is this a set? You know, I'm very skeptical. I wasn't with Lear and Lazar. I'm thinking, are these guys having me off here? You know, what's going on? So I experienced that. The biggest joy for me is I met him. And he was exactly to the moon, Alice kind of guy. Totally that. And quite friendly. He was a lovely host. I was in his home. I got a good buzz. I didn't drink the Rob Roy's, but I tried this with man. But I remember him saying very clearly, and they wonder why I drink. And he didn't say that with any jest in his voice.
I
so
can
that's what
understand.
happened. Yeah.